tell you the first time I ever spoke to Deepak. It was over a Zoom call. The Penguin CEO had connected us. He'd, of course, like most people, been coached by Deepak at some point. It was a very interesting conversation. I had, of course, listened to many of Deepak's podcasts, and I was convinced that he had a book in him. So I went the whole hog. I spoke to him. I gave him the whole picture, and I thought he'd be flattered. I thought he had all the material. But Deepak demurred. He felt he wasn't ready. And I think that says a lot about who Deepak is. Some years later, Deepak came back, and I felt that something had shifted. He was now ready, and this book is the result of that. It is enriching. It has many observations, of course, from his McKinsey, Egon Zehnder days, and then his days as a coach, as a podcast host, and now as unbelievably an already best-selling author. His book has gone for a reprint today, standing at launch day. In conversation with Deepak is former CEO, motivational speaker, sought-after coach, best-selling author, and a dear friend, Prakash Iyer. Can I please have them both on stage? We'll have about 45 minutes of the book conversation. Prakash will get Deepak to do some interesting things and also peel back the layers on play to potential, and followed by question and answers. Deepak will be signing copies later, and I hope you all will read the book, gift it to people, push it hard, and support it as much as you can. So thank you so much for being here this evening.
This is an evening which is so special. It's all about playing to potential. And as this book will, as you'll figure from the book, a key part of playing to potential is getting the family to be an integral part of what's happening. So Deepak has his family out here. So let's hear it for all those amazing people. Typically in his book, Deepak would have written, without whom the book might have happened faster. But, yeah. But they're all here. But the other part of play to potential, of course, is lots of leaders here, lots of some fabulous people from the corporate world, very successful, very terrific people out here. But really the fun bit is there's an equal number of search consultants also over here. Yeah. So you'll have enough people playing to potential tonight. Yeah. So yeah. But thank you so much, and Deepak, how does it feel now that the book is out, formally out? You talk about tuning into your inner self and trying to hear the voice. What's the voice saying?
Excited, Prakash. At the outset, thank you so much for getting me started on this journey. Maybe if you, before I answer your question, Prakash was the person who actually said, Deepak, you should write a book, and reconnected me to Radhika. And in a way, I'm very grateful for Prakash because he was the seed that made this book happen. So thank you, Prakash.
Radhika commissions separately, yeah?
No, I feel excited. I think clearly 2-3 years back, the Play to Potential podcast started in 2016. I saw it as a river that keeps flowing. Somehow the concept of bottling it into something, I wasn't sure if it made sense, but I think you provoked me, and I think 2 years back I'd gone for my 25-year reunion at IIT Madras. And some of my friends asked me, so when's the book coming? When's the book coming? So I think I've also come to realize that very often people see you better than you see yourself. So I said, maybe there's a book that's waiting to be written. So in a way, excited to put it out there for people to read.
Oh, we're all so excited that it's actually happened. And clearly, Deepak, play to potential has been an idea that's been in your head for a while, right? This whole thing about the podcast and now the book. So I'm just wondering, where did it start? Is there a specific instance, an incident or a memory, or someone said something that made you feel that, this whole idea of playing to potential is potentially a big idea?
I think when I go back to Egon Zehnder days, I see some of my friends there. Whenever we look at a leader, we look at the leader's competencies, which is how the leader gets things done, but also look at the leader's potential, which is to say 5 years later, 10 years later, I mean, as they say in the movie, in the movie Diwar in Hindi, right? Lambe race ka ghoda, as they say. So we would always say, what are the markers of potential that we can look for? So that was my first introduction to potential in the workplace context. Then I got introduced to Antarang Foundation, which Priya Agarwal runs, and I think she's traveling. And I realized that, they help children from communities, let's say economically challenged communities, help them play to their potential. And now I'm using my language, but in a way I felt that, like Warren Buffett says, right, we are all given an ovarian lottery. Some of us have it, some don't. Somehow I felt that while the world of opportunity was skewed, the distribution of intrinsic potential was uniform. So somehow that was sort of my second, if you will, experience with the word potential. So when it came to starting the podcast, I knew it had to be something to do with potential, and Play to Potential sort of emerged as a title as a result.
Yeah, and I think part of this whole idea of potential is the belief that, you have some talent which kind of needs to surface and be seen by the world. Also perhaps that you have hidden talents, right? So I'm just wondering, what's a hidden talent that Deepak has which the world doesn't know?
I guess some of the people in the room might know, but I'm an avid ball juggler. I learnt juggling many years back.
Wow.
So that's something that some people know, but it's a passion of mine. It's one of those things where for a lot of time I've felt, is there any use to learning it? But it's one of those skills which I still enjoy.
Wow, and are you going to show us how to juggle?
Sure, if the people want, I can
Say
perform
yes,
something.
come on, let's hear it.
So this is bean bags. You can juggle with many balls, but I've learned up to 3 balls, and you can do multiple patterns with 3 balls. So I'll try it. I might drop the ball in the middle, but just bear with me.
Woo. Whoa. Well done. Hey, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. How cool is that? How cool is that?
I have some friends from London from 1999 days. Ramesh, for example, is in the room. I know he must have thought, what a crazy guy. He goes to a place called Camden Town. I change two tube stations and end up, but 20 years later, it's now on the cover. And I should credit my wife, Kamini, for inspiring me for the cover. Initially, we had a Venn diagram to talk about potential, but I think she was the one that convinced me, saying, you like to juggle, so maybe you should consider juggling. So thank you for the provocation.
And thank you also for the reminder that behind every consultant is a sane wife.
Correct.
Spouse, partner,
Correct.
friend.
Exactly.
Yeah?
Exactly. Somebody who shows the mirror.
Terrific stuff. There's lots of interesting stuff in the book, and I'm just thinking of one to get us started, which is Vishy Anand and his move number 40, right? I found it fascinating. I thought you must tell us all about a little bit more about it and how that might actually impact all of us. Or
Absolutely. So Vishy was kind enough to come on my podcast. He was, I think, guest number 20 or 19 in the journey. And while talking about performance, he said that in a long chess match, after move 40, let's say it's a 1.5 hour game. After move 40, each player is given an extra half an hour to compete. So what he said was, very often you will find yourself in move 39 and you're scrambling for time because there's 2 minutes left. But when you cross move 40, you're left with not 2 minutes, but 32 minutes. And he would say that very often players make the mistake of just rushing into move number 41 without realizing that the context has changed. So he said, now what I do is I take a pause, I go for a walk, I grab a coffee, I have some water, come back and play my 41st move. And that can make all the difference. And I think that stayed with me, Prakash, because in a way, 40, if I sort of look at it in terms of age, 40 is around the time where, in a way, we are speeding through life. In a way, kids keep us busy, work keeps us busy, and there are many things pulling at us. So I think that sort of this notion of pausing around that, whether it's move 40 or year 40, I think it's a beautiful metaphor for pausing before moving on in life.
Which is such a powerful idea, and like most good ideas, comes to us after we've kind of missed the bus, I'm guessing. But but it happens to all of us. But I thought this was really interesting, and when you think of playing to potential, I think one of the words that comes to mind for most of us is Ikigai. And I must confess, I myself have used that, and I know Deepak has used that in kind of the decisions that he's taken or I've taken in my life. And now Deepak has an interesting take on Ikigai to say, maybe it's not the full story, and perhaps there's a need to challenge Ikigai and rethink it. What's the difference? Tell us.
Yeah, thank you, Prakash. I think Ikigai, as I said, I found it useful as a North Star. When I left Egon's Ender and started my own, I felt I wanted to do something that I enjoy, something that could make a difference, and something where maybe there's a potential commercial possibility. And that led me to work on the space of transitions, because every candidate conversation was a career transition conversation. Every client conversation at Egon's Ender was a leadership transition conversation. So I felt maybe I had a sort of a unique skill set, a career capital in sort of talking about transitions. So that's where I started. But when I look at my conversations with my coaches and several other leaders over the years, I find that Ikigai, for a lot of people, feels like Mount Everest. They want to go for a trek in Lonavala, but Ikigai to sort of find that bullseye of this is what the world needs, this is what I enjoy, this is what, when you look at those 4 circles, they say, this is too utopian for me. And I was actually chatting with a friend of mine, Venki Srinivasan, who I think is in the room somewhere. I was telling him it feels a bit like being stuck in a traffic jam in Dharavi and somebody points you to the North Star saying, get out of the traffic jam. And he 2 days later sent me a beautiful quote from the movie Lincoln, where Lincoln says, a compass will point you to the true north, but has absolutely no guidance for the swamps and the chasms and the ravines that you will encounter along the way. So in the pursuit of the true north, if you if you sink in a swamp, there's no glory in it. So I got a sense that while Ikigai is great as a North Star, it doesn't quite account for the messiness of life. When I look around, there are, people often work to earn money because that money is important. And they might earn that money by doing something they don't enjoy. But it's a choice. So I wanted to put out something that's a little more granular that people can grapple with as they go through the messiness of their life, and hopefully through that reach their potential.
Sure. And Deepak, also talked about a very simple equation. Obviously, it didn't find its place on the cover, but it's there. There is this M greater than W greater than N. And I think he talks about how in our lives we go through the situation where we have needs, we have wants, and of course you need money. And how early in your life, if I get it right now, the money is less than your needs and clearly less than your wants. Some money comes in, becomes greater than needs, and then finally your money greater than wants. Tell us, how does that actually work for us? Because I'm just wondering, is this book really talking to people who've, in a sense, made the money and now are figuring out what to do? Is that a fair way to think about it?
That's a good question, Prakash. See, I think there are 3 variables, right? One is the amount of money we need. Let's just say loosely translated as the needs, wants put together. Thank you, Pragya. So needs, wants, and the money. And I think going back to the metaphor, right? I mean, we've all heard of the story of an elephant that was chained for many years, and 20 years later somebody removes the chain, and the elephant still doesn't realize and still stays in the same place. So I think what I observed was several leaders often cross the point of, if I may say, financial independence. Again, financial independence doesn't necessarily mean having saved for the rest of your life. Let's just say having crossed the point of being financially comfortable, but still I felt a lot of them were solving for money while ignoring many other factors. So yes, I think the book, if somebody is struggling to find the first job and is, having a tough entry, the book may not speak to them. But I think a few years in, when you sort of experience the various forces of life, family, kids, parents, health, intensity at work, then hopefully the book speaks to them.
Deepak, when I read that, it reminded me of the time several years ago I used to be at Pepsi. And around the turn of the century, we had a campaign to beat all campaigns. And it was all about a line which said, Ye dil mange more, right? And it seemed to kind of appeal to an entire generation of youth. This whole idea of it's not enough, I need more. Now, horror, 24 years later, all those youth are now running companies here. Very successful in their lives. Now, how does this actually work? Is there a way to figure out that, look, actually more is not better? And as a coach, as someone who's written this book, what advice would you have for people to figure this out?
I think very often in management, we use the term, what gets measured gets managed, right? You set the right metrics. There are some private equity investors, VC investors. They set metrics, and then automatically people deliver those metrics. What I've noticed, and Clay Christensen said this in his book as well, right? How will you measure your life? Very often, outcomes in work can be measured. And people often end up over-indexing on delivering on that because it's very visible. And what I realized was if I could present a little more of a balanced scorecard, then hopefully people at least bring to people's awareness what the different dimensions are. Then at least hopefully people can make trade-offs and course correct and think about leading a holistic life. Back to the juggling as a metaphor, Prakash, what I've realized is, some of these balls end up being glass balls. I juggled beanbag, so I could drop a beanbag and pick it up. But in real life, I've noticed that some balls are glass balls, and once dropped, then it's hard to recover them. So my objective through this is to move people away from what's easily measurable towards some of the other things which are a little more in the gray but intangible. And hopefully people can make those trade-offs depending on their context. That's not to say everything needs to have more of something or less of something. But I think each one of us has to make those trade-offs depending on our life context and our situation.
And I guess this whole juggling balls often gets referenced when you look at work-life balance, for example, yes. Right? And of course, you now have a gentleman who shall remain unnamed, who says that 70 hours is like a pretty decent work week, right? What do you make of that?
It's a good one. I toss and turn about it as well.
You clearly are a shareholder of that company.
And I think I would have to say, here's my take on this. If one operates in a resource-scarce environment, I feel one has to push a little bit to hit escape velocity. For example, I had to work that extra hard in 11th and 12th to have a chance to get into IIT, had to work that extra hard to get into IIM, work that extra hard, etc., etc. So now, having come to a point, if I say none of that matters, I think that would be inauthentic. So I think there is a role of hard work. However, I think what I've also come to appreciate is, what are we working hard on? In a sense, and that's where I think I like the title Play to Potential. One of the guests at the podcast, when I sum up the conversation, I ask a question, what does that phrase play to potential mean to you? And that person said, the answer is in your title. So I said, what do you mean? He said, you can't work to your potential, you can only play to your potential. And I think that was very revealing for me. So back to the 70-hour thing, what I've come to realize is if we put in those 70 hours in something that we truly enjoy, what feels like play, then I feel it's less depleting, And I think I've also come to realize the distinction between doing and being. When we are doing something, I think it depletes us. But when we are being ourselves, I feel there's some infinite energy that we can tune into. So I think, but having said that early on, we may not have the luxury of making some of those choices, but as soon as we can, if we can sort of find what is play for us, then I feel it's less about the hours, but more about which mountain are we climbing and how laborious does it feel versus what feels like play and how can we contribute.
Yeah, but I want to stay with this because as a young manager, I once happened to listen in to KV Kamath, who at that time used to be running ICICI Bank, and he had a great point about work-life balance. And he said, I have no problem with a young manager who wants to leave at 5 or does not want to come into work on a Saturday morning. But he should know, or she should know, that if I have a major project to run, I will not count on that person, I'll count on someone else. And he then said that the risk you run is, if you try and look for work-life balance, you might find it too soon at a suboptimal level. And therefore, the idea would be to slog, listen in to Mr. Murthy, work 70 hours, 7 days a week, get somewhere, and then try and find work-life balance. Is that something that you would subscribe to?
It's a good question, Prakash. And
answer is no, he doesn't agree, but yeah.
No, I think there is a place for working hard. So this book is not about settling, if I may. It's not about leading an easy life or a comfortable life. I genuinely believe for a minute, I think what sometimes gets missed in the discussion is the long game of life. It's a bit like Sehwag might score 20 runs in 2 overs in a T20. But the question really is that approach what I would suggest to an Indian team that's going to play cricket in Perth? That's going to happen very soon. So somewhere I feel that's sort of point number one. Number two, I've also come to realize, Jeff Bezos talks about one-way doors and two-way doors. When I was looking at, I'll share a personal anecdote. One of my mentors, Rajiv Lochan, he's not in the room, he couldn't make it, but he was one of the other people that provoked me to write the book. When I was looking at choices post-Egon Zehnder, one of the things he said was, Deepak, you have a daughter. There is a phase between when the daughter is, let's say, maybe 7 and 12, where the daughter thinks daddy is Superman. Don't capitalize on that window, because once that window is shut, it's never coming back. I'm glad I could spend the time with Pragya. I don't know if she thinks I'm a Superman, but I did what I could. But I think what gets missed very often is reconnecting with the kid. Being busy till the kid turns 20, 25, and then having all the time and spending the time. I'm not sure if that compensates for lost time. So once again, not for a minute suggesting we settle, but I think if we can I see this as a flywheel and not as a trade-off. Very often I think work life gets positioned as a trade-off. But I think if we can find the flywheel, climb the mountain that we enjoy, what feels like play, devote the time to family, I feel we can still get more done at work, show up differently at work, be more effective, build those relationships, and I feel that might get us to a better place and hopefully help us play the long game with vitality and happiness.
Wise words, yeah, terrific.
Thank you.
That's so useful for all of us. In this book, there's a lot about the work that Deepak does as a coach, helping leaders, and I found some of that very, very interesting. And in one section, he's got like 10 questions that you ask a coachee or a leader to try and help them figure out their lives, right? Here's a little tip. Just buy that book, read those 10 questions, and try and answer them. And you might actually discover, bits about yourself that even you didn't know. So tell me, Deepak, of those 10 questions, which of them, is there a question that you found to be particularly insightful or powerful in these conversations? What would that be?
I think it's the one on superpowers. I find that very often people, if I go back to the metaphor of a venture capitalist, we recently had a IPO with Swiggy, and there were multiple venture capitalists taking photos with how early they bet on Swiggy. I find that even when it comes to our strengths and development areas, the outsized returns come from our superpowers. And very often I find that people are very poor self-predictors of their own superpowers. I'll give you my example. When I was looking at opportunities post-McKinsey, I was typically looking at things like venture capital, private equity, strategic planning roles, etc. But one of my mentors, Ramesh Mangaleshwaran, who couldn't make it today, he looked at me and said, you seem to have a passion for the people side of things. I'll introduce you to Govind Iyer at Egon Zehnder, and I feel you'd be effective there. So I find that, to your point, Prakash, people I find are very poor predictors of their own superpowers, and sometimes, every Hanuman needs a Jambavan, as they say. Somebody else sees us better than we can. And that's one thing I've discovered through the coaching journey.
And clearly, it never hurts to go to an Iyer for advice. Yeah. So yeah.
True
so
that.
Tell me something. There's, as you look at leaders, what is the one thing that seems to stop people from playing to potential?
I think it's a tough one to answer in overall terms, but I would say it's self-awareness. I think very often I find, paradoxically enough, as people grow to the top, you either encounter silence or noise. You stop getting good signal in terms of how people see you. And if I had to pick one thing that comes in the way of people playing to potential, it's really self-awareness. Very often people are able to sort of meditate the way through the problem. They have mindfulness practices, meditation practices. But how do people perceive you on the playground? Very often, good signal is hard to come by. And very often people assume silence is an indication of everything is okay. But sometimes there's much more happening in the background. So I would say it's, if I had to pick one thing that people don't do enough of, I think it's just ensuring that they get good signal that they can work with in terms of modifying their behavior.
Yeah. And I think to that you also added an interesting dimension, which is most leaders tend to look for feedback around what can I do better? What am I not doing too well? Whereas asking that question around your superpowers and saying, what do I do bloody well? What am I really, really good at? can be a very powerful question in answering this, right?
And I spoke to a gentleman called Dan Cable at London Business School, and he uses a term called eulogy delay. And he says there's a reason for it. You know, when somebody passes away, we find it very comfortable to talk about what was great about that person when the person is not around us. But when the person is in front of us, there's some awkwardness that seems to come in, which comes in the way, which leads to us not praising them about their superpowers. So we all need to find our mechanism to break that awkwardness because of, there's a term for it, eulogy delay, apparently.
Wow, what a powerful idea. But staying with that, I just want to have a quick question. When I walked in this evening, somebody said, there's Deepak. You know what? Deepak is always smiling. What's the secret? See. Yeah.
A happy wife is a good start.
She smiles.
No, she smiles, I smile, they're all correlated. I think, number one, I don't think I'm smiling all the time. You should talk to her to get the true 360. But I think, once again, I bring it back to probably pursuing something that I enjoy and that gives me joy. And genuinely feel, it's a bit like I used to train for half marathons. I don't do that long distance anymore. My brother-in-law is a long distance runner. He does ultra marathons now. But I found that somehow if you hit a phase where you hit that sort of pace that you think you can run another 10 kilometers, 20 kilometers, then you start soaking in the breeze at Worli Sea Face, Marine Drive as you cross it. You're not huffing and puffing through life. So I think in the last few years, I feel there's resonance between what I'm doing and who I'm being. And I think in general, on average, not all the time, I feel I'm in a good space.
Great. And I just wanted to go back to the book now, and there's a framework which she's got into this book on how to actually play to potential and what can all of us do to get it right. And that's really what you see up there, which is flavor-ful lives. And flavor is really the framework that Deepak has got. So 60-second pitch on helping us understand flavor.
Thank you. And before I go to the flavor model, I should thank my friend Vivek Khemka. You know, initially when I started writing the book, it was just about curating some of the insights from the podcast. He was the one that provoked me to say, you know, where is Deepak's voice in this? And I'm grateful for that provocation.
Where is Vivek?
Vivek. Thank you, Vivek.
Thanks, Vivek. Let's hear it for him.
I think the quick, as I say these days, TLDR on flavor is, F is about family, tuning into family context, being aware of our past, tuning into the transitions underway, whether it's maternity, empty nesting, maybe loss of a loved one, maternity, etc. L is having space for what you love, what energizes you. For me, it's playing guitar and recording songs with family. For someone else, it might be gardening, pottery, whatever. What gives you joy? A is aspiration and not ambition, because ambition, I find, is sort of unidimensional or monochromatic. I find aspiration to be a little more holistic across the various identities we have. You know, how do we think about moving forward? And I think I used to struggle to explain aspiration. I got the most elegant definition of aspiration from my son over a dinner table. He said, Appa, it's a bit like playing Chinese checkers. You need to move all the pieces to the other side. If you just take one piece and move it to the other side, it's futile. So just each of those pieces is an identity. So how do we move all the pieces to the other side and think about all the various identities we carry? So thank you, Nemo. VO is about, I find even the world of work is going through a change. Early in our journeys, work comes in nice titles, right? Associate here, analyst there, management trainee here. But I think once we cross 30, 40, 50, I think things come in all shapes and forms, and we discover who we are. And what I've realized is all of us need to go through a talent market dating process. You know, things don't come in clean shapes and forms. And VO is how do we be of value and find opportunity, seek opportunity or create opportunity. And I think this is as relevant for, let's say, the corporate athletes in the room as it is for homemakers. Because what I've also observed is that very often people that are over-indexed on family, sometimes, you know, they find that family can be a low feedback or a low gratitude environment. And very often, even if feedback comes, it can be seen as patronizing. So I find that VO, all of us need to tune into our aspirations and find a way of being value to the world. It might be volunteering somewhere, it might be teaching one kid, it might be building a unicorn, it might be running a company. But what is VO for us in line with our aspirations? And we need to go through a dating process. U is investing in yourself. which is, physical health, mental health, and capabilities for us to stay relevant and sort of invest for the future. And R is relationships, friendships. And also I find relationships are a pathway to new possibilities, right? In a way, Ramesh Mangaleshwaran, I call it the 9 3/4 platform in Harry Potter, right? If he hadn't connected me to Egon Zehnder, this whole world of Hogwarts wouldn't have opened up for me. This whole executive search and coaching and the podcast and this. So I think relationships very often are seen as something that we need to stay happy. But I think they do much more than that. They create, open up new pathways, new platforms, and open up new worlds. So that's flavor. It's not one after the other. I think we all need to understand that just like a business model needs to be coherent, we all need to figure out what is coherence in our flavor. And the last thing is, as we go through life, just like in ice cream, we have flavor of the season, right? We go through seasons, and each one of us needs to find a flavor that's relevant for that season. So the flavor of the season in our 20s might be different from the flavor in our 40s or 50s. So we need to, like Satya Nadella says, right, hit refresh. We also need to hit refresh when it comes to flavor over time. So that's, sorry, it wasn't 1 minute, but that's the TLDR.
Yeah, and I think it also gives everyone a flavor of what's in the book. Exactly. And as you can see from the way he does this, it's this calm, oh my goodness, this is going to make so much sense. And yet there is a framework to it. So, this could have been a book which could have been titled The Monk Who Left McKinsey or something like that, So clearly it does work. But, there's something interesting in this book. There are 6 people who have been profiled in this book who in some senses, or in Deepak's estimation, lead flavorful lives. And surprise, surprise, some of those 6 people are actually in this room, and you know who you are. So can I just request you to please stand up? So
I should call them out. We have Sumit Mehta.
Sumit, put your hand up.
Sumit,
there he is.
Sumit runs Lead, which is now a unicorn, funded by Westbridge. We have Sangeeta Shahane, somewhere in the room. Hi, Sangeeta. She's come down from Pune. So she runs a successful SAT coaching business based out of Pune. We have Ravi Shankar Iyer, somewhere in the room. Hi, Ravi.
There he is.
So Ravi is a chartered accountant. I think he's a 10th ranker or 11th ranker, IMA. Now he's a storytelling coach. But I think, and there are 3 people who couldn't make it today. Sucharita Mukherjee, there is Soma Biswas, and there is Vineet Panchi. They couldn't make it. But I think 2-3 things. One is each one of them have done significant inner work on themselves and made a bunch of tough choices in line with their authentic selves. There's significant resonance between who they are and what they do. And there's a sense of agency with which they walk through life. So to me, those 3 things stood out. And I wanted to profile a range of different people and also take the narrative away from the typical 40 under 40, 50 under 50 kind of leaders, but really to say, all of us have a certain context. We are given a set of cards. Given those cards, are we playing to our potential? And that's a question we all need to answer.
Yeah, and so when you're having dinner, who you want to reach out to and ask some questions, some interesting people in our midst. I just want to kind of flip this a little bit to say that, look, there are a few things in this book which I found, like interesting little nuggets, and I want to try and touch upon them. One of them says that, India's score is 150 for 6 at the end of the 15th over. Is that a good score or a bad score? And what does that have to do with all of us? Tell us.
I think the metaphor there is the numerator, 150, in a way is visible outcomes, right? That might have been the money you made or the title you have, etc. The 6, the wickets, in a way indicates the health. When I say health, it could be your personal health. It could be the health of your relationships. It could be multiple other things. But it's one is sort of the performance metric. If I may say the P&L metric, the other is a balance sheet metric. And very often I find that we tend to measure the performance metric very intuitively, and we conclude that we are doing well. So the point I make is 150 for 6 in 15 overs is a wonderful score if you're playing a T20, but it's a lousy score if you're playing a test match. Very often we view our progress in life with the lens of a T20. And if we suddenly flip it to look at it as a test match, assuming that we all live 100 years and work till we are 70 or 80, then the same situation ends up being less attractive. So that's the crux of what I'm trying to say. Let's try and get a sense of. I see Anita smiling at me. The cricket metaphor clearly landed. So I think the real question is how are we looking at life, and what's the duration for which we are playing? Are we playing a T20 or are we playing a test match? And that can determine how we look at the scoreboard and discern where we are.
Yeah, and I must confess, one of my favorite lines in this book was something about how we can all feel good about the runs on the board, but we don't always recognize the wickets we may have lost along the way. I thought it's a pretty powerful line. As you talked about profit and loss and balance sheet, I couldn't help thinking, Ravi Shankar, if you could just stand up once again. Ravi is this, he's a visionary, trailblazer, path-breaking guy in the real sense of the phrase, because something we've always suspected, but he's the first man to openly come out and say, as a chartered accountant, I'm a storyteller. Yeah? So, well done, Ravi, for actually being brave enough to kind of do that for all of us. Yeah? Something else that he talks about in this book is Taylor and Morgan, or Tandon and Mehta, or whatever else it was. I think that's another very interesting concept, Taylor and Morgan. Tell us about it.
Well, this is something I learned from a lady called Ashley Willens at Harvard Business School. And she's written a book called Time Smart. And she goes on to say that very often when we have very little time at our disposal, there's a certain sense of poverty that we feel. And we are very easy. We find it very easy to measure the monetary poverty, but we often don't measure the time poverty that we encounter. So she says there are two types of people that she's come across: Taylors, or Teresa, to be gender agnostic, or Morgans or Michelle. Taylors are people that value time and make choices in the context of how they want to deploy their time. So they're very precious about how they want to spend their time and sort of manage their energy. Morgans or Michelles are people that value money or commercial outcomes and prioritize money. But she goes on to say that paradoxically enough, Taylors end up choosing to climb a mountain which is more joyful and end up making more money than Morgans. While the Morgans are busy measuring the money, the Taylors, because they care about how they spend the time, what is play for them versus what is work for them, end up making a set of choices and end up making more money than the Morgans who actually are focused on the money. So it's a bit like, to put it in a sort of that, the Buddhist metaphor, right? If you want to catch a butterfly, you don't go and catch it. You sit and meditate and the butterfly will stand on your shoulder. So it's a bit like that. And she goes on to use an example of how the French and the Americans eat lunch. She says if the French go to a restaurant, they'll just pick a good enough restaurant and they will savor the meal. They will enjoy the meal, enjoy the conversation, enjoy the company, and really soak in the experience. While the Americans will over-optimize on, the restaurant, Michelin star, menu card, this, that, and end up picking the perfect restaurant, but end up having a very superficial or a shallow conversation. So I think she sort of brings it back to the point to say, what are you valuing? What are you solving for? Are you solving for time? Are you solving for money? And paradoxically enough, if you solve for time, you end up making adequate money. So that was the context.
Yeah, and like they would say in the blurbs, this one question alone will pay for today's time spent over here. I think it's such a powerful idea to say, do you value your time? Are you a Taylor? Or do you value money more? Are you a Morgan? Yeah. So these were some of my favorite parts of the book. But Deepak, I know I'm going to throw this open in just a bit for your questions. So, be ready with them. But before that, is there a favorite paragraph or a page from this book? We'd love you to read it out to us. Yeah. So that, I felt as I read the book that it wasn't so much reading as much as Deepak talking to me. So let's get a flavor of what's in the book. Would you like to read something out?
Sure. Thank you. Let me see. Maybe I'll pick the parting thought section of the book.
I must also tell you, this book is hugely, it reveals a skill of Deepak's skill, which I didn't know, which is his ability to kind of look into the future, very Zen-like, predict what's going to happen. Because in the first or second paragraph of the introduction to this book, there's a name, and I'm guessing this book was written at least 3 months back. There's a name which is Elon Musk. Clearly knows which way the world is going, long before we all did.
So this is how I conclude the book. It's a couple of pages. Hopefully you'll stay with me. Very often when we think of the word high potential, stalwarts like Sachin Tendulkar, Serena Williams, P.V. Sindhu, Vishy Anand, Steve Jobs, A.R. Rahman, Amitabh Bachchan, Lata Mangeshkar, and so on come to our mind, we naturally drift to people who are at the top of their field. I used to have a similar view on potential as well. However, as I started getting more curious about potential, I started noticing that all of us were dealt with a different set of cards. While the distribution of opportunity is possibly skewed, I truly believe that the distribution of potential is quite uniform across the population. The real question, I believe, is whether we are playing the game to the best of our capability, given the cards life has dealt us. Like the late Thurgood Marshall said, are we doing what we can with what we have? And are we being multidimensional in the way we think about potential? I hope this book has given you some food for thought and action in finding a holistic response to that question. I've wondered if we should make a distinction between individuals who are leading a well-rounded life and those who are playing to full potential. I notice that people often see leading a well-rounded life as some sort of a compromise, settlement, or a cop-out. I believe that if we are true to our multidimensional aspiration and proactively reconcile the tensions between the various domains of our lives, we can strive to play to our full potential while leading a well-rounded life. When we invest in some of the other domains like L, love, you invest in yourself, and R, relationships, it can impact the quality of the value we add to the world, which is VO, and hence the impact we have over the long run. I'm not sure if there's a dichotomy here. I see leading a full life more as a flywheel that can put us on the path of playing to a full potential as a human being. I also notice that the language around potential is often designed to laud the hunter more than the gatherer, the striker more than the goalkeeper, or the earner more than the homemaker. I hope that the language in this book gives agency to people playing various roles in the family to play to their respective potential. I should also be explicit about where I stand when it comes to my relationship with Ikigai. I found the language helpful in my journey and in the context of some of the choices I have made. However, just like how a vision statement doesn't translate into a strategic plan, I find that Ikigai is too high level to inform some of the on-the-ground choices we have to make in our lives. To go back to the quote from Lincoln, we could use Ikigai to get a sense of where we need to head eventually, and flavor to navigate the swamps, deserts, and chasms that we encounter. It doesn't have to be an either-or. For a long time in my life, I understood language as a descriptive tool, something we use to illustrate what is going on around us. Of late, I've come to believe that language is more of a generative tool. The language we use can shape the future we build for ourselves. I sincerely hope that the various themes illustrated in the book and the flavor framework provide you the language to explore new possibilities and architect a life that puts you on the path of playing to your full potential.
Lovely, lovely. We'll just come back maybe for a couple of final questions. But before that, let me just try and see if there are some questions. What would you like? Oh, lots of hands going up.
Can we have a couple of mics? Pragya, Nemo?
Hello.
Thanks,
So Deepak, congratulations first of all, and wonderful. I've been knowing you since more than a year, and I am Harshal, and I must have launched more than 1,000 books, but I haven't seen an author who's so well prepared.
Thank
so
you.
Huge round of applause, honestly.
Thank you.
Like more than a year, you must have definitely thought and put this together, and that's how the environment, nature, and playing to your potential. And I'll keep to my question. So how this book can help, like New Year's resolution, which is upcoming. Every year we try and come up with something, and then, you know, it's like the milk. You try, it goes down after a point in time, especially with your health and many other such issues. So what is your take in terms of play to potential and how it can help to have a good, balanced and playing to your potential?
Thank you. I think given the way the book has been written, hopefully end of the year as people unwind, take stock, and hopefully reflect a little bit on 2025 and beyond, the book hopefully can give language to people to take stock of life and think harder about some of the choices they make, what they say yes to, what they say no to as they think about 2025 and beyond. So in a way, end of the year is a sort of a timely window when people naturally get into a little bit of a reflective mode. So hopefully book can play the role of a catalyst in driving some of those reflections.
Next question, someone, yep, there's a hand out there from our...
The CA storyteller.
Thank you.
Anyways, now, congrats Deepak, and can't wait to read the book. I had a question about the book writing journey itself, right? How's it been? And when you started off, you might have had some expectations on how it's going to be. So what has been your biggest surprise or learning through this journey? And if you had to do it again, maybe the next book, what would you do different, if anything?
Thank you, Ravi. I think, as I said, it started out as me trying to distill some of the wisdom from the podcast, but thanks to Radhika. Where is Radhika? I think she was patient with me and provoked me, and I think thanks to Vivek's provocation as well, I hit a block around maybe September-ish 2023, saying what am I trying to say through the book. And I must also mention my coach Shweta Mani, who's in the room. Shweta, if you could stand up for a minute. She was the one who pushed me to say, she played the role of a coach in the writing process. And she pushed me to say, what are you trying to say? And we sort of came to the distillation that I'm trying to talk about potential in a holistic sense. Till then, actually, the initial version of the book was designed for the corporate athlete on how the person can do better. But in a way, working with her gave me the clarity that I really want to talk about potential in a holistic sense. And in a way, that sort of eventually led to the book here. So to your question, Ravi, I would say even the book writing process is a journey in itself, and I think it's hard to predict what you will get into. So I would say start somewhere, but be open to, I think the one thing I would do more of is just be a little more open to the feedback that people give, or possibly even proactively tune into the feedback and see what the book could become. Because what you think it is at the beginning and what it ends up being are very different things. So just maybe sail with the wind a little bit more.
Hi Deepak, congratulations of course on the book.
Thank you,
And
Pratna.
of course we've been following and a fan of the podcast. You talked about superpowers, and of course superpowers are very important. But Superman also has kryptonite. So how do you navigate around that, or in your coaching journeys with the leaders you coach, how have you sort of tackled that piece of it? And you know where I come from.
Absolutely.
When it comes to the dark side. So.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Pradnya. Pradnya was actually one of my early teachers when I was doing the Hogan certification. So I had the privilege of being taught by Pradnya. So thank you. So I think, yes, we all have our weaknesses. Let me take a personal example, right? When I started this coaching journey, one thing I realized is that I'm not good at being assertive and tough with a coachee. You know, there would be some situations where the coach needs to hold the coachee accountable, saying, have you done this, have you done that? And in the first few instances, I realized that I was actually not being effective. And even if I could, you know, go in to the conversation a little primed up, I realized that that was not my natural self. So over time, I've come to sort of realize who I am and who I am not. And I've been a little more selective with the kind of people I'm working with. So I work better with people who lean into the process than in some situations where people actually need the coaching but are not leaning in. I realize that very often upfront I tell the client, you know, I don't think this needs a little bit of a Chak De India Shah Rukh Khan. I don't think I'm that, you know, somebody who's tough and who can demand performance. I'm not me. So I think there is a piece around, you know, the choices we make in terms of where we play in tune with our strengths and weaknesses. So that's sort of step number one in terms of figuring out the mountain to climb and what we do and what we say no to. I think the second piece also is being aware of it and maybe ring-fencing it. Maybe if it's something that you're not good at, can you hire somebody who can do that for you? Can you sort of ring-fence it, take feedback, work on it? But I think the acceleration comes from the superpowers. You just need to ensure that these don't act as brakes. So you either find leverage for it or, you know, work on it and try and at least, you know, fake it till you make it. But I think the bigger piece I feel is really the choices we can make to ensure that we are playing to our strengths. That's the way I see it.
One more question before we go, and that question is from me, since no other hand is going up. Yep.
Sure.
Is there anybody else who's got a question before we? Okay. So I don't have a question. I think a lot of what we've heard today is about how this book is not just about the corporate athlete, but about getting the rest of your life also together, which is to have a passion in life, to have something else that gets you excited, to care about family and to make it happen. So what we want to do is, before we end, I want to call upon two of the finest mic runners in the country, Nemo and Pragya. Can you just come up, please, onto the stage? So now we have Deepak and the two of them, and they're going to perform for us. How about that? Okay?
Thank you.
Let's hear it for them. Come on. Come.
Thank you, Prakash.
Go for it. Come on. Come on. Let's hear it for Deepak, Pragya, and both of them will now try and find Nemo.
पापा कहते हैं बड़ा नाम करेगा, बेटा हमारा ऐसा काम करेगा, मगर ये तो कोई न जाने कि मेरी मंजिल है कहाँ। पापा कहते हैं बड़ा नाम करेगा, बैठे हैं मिलके सब यार अपने, सबके दिलों में अरमाए हैं वो जिंदगी में कल क्या बनेगा, हर एक नजर का सपना ये है कोई इंजीनियर का काम करेगा, बिजनेस में कोई अपना नाम करेगा, मगर ये तो कोई न जाने कि मेरी मंजिल है कहाँ। पापा कहते हैं बड़ा नाम करेगा, we don't need no education, we don't need no thought control, no dark sarcasm in the classroom, teachers leave us kids alone, hey teachers, leave us kids alone. All in all, it's just another break in the wall. All in all, it's just another break in the wall.
And as we bring this evening to, not to an end, but to just this part of the session to an end, could I just make one more request? Kamini, could you please come up on stage? Come. And let's just have the four of them together. Wait. Yeah. Come. Come right away. And I think there's a lot in this book that you'll find interesting to say, what does playing to potential look like? And you can probably find a framework and say, that's what playing to potential is. You could do all of that, or you could just look at this and say, that's what playing to potential is all about. Thank you so much, Deepak, for a wonderful book, and thank you to all of you for making it happen. Thank you so much. Well done. Thank you so much. Before we finish, as you saw, Radhika is a tough salesperson. I hope you're going to buy the book, and I hope you're going to gift it. And I hope you're also going to make sure that your New Year gift is that book. Plus this other author she has in Penguin, who also writes a little bit, but yeah. Yeah, but all said and done, you know what? Deepak is still available to sign books. If you'd like to buy a copy, if you don't have one yet, remember, this is being caught on camera. If you're leaving this place without a book, it's going to be on social media tomorrow, so be careful. Yeah? But thank you so much for being here and being such a wonderful audience.
Thank you, Prakash.
And one last time,
Thank you, Prakash. Actually, if I may take just 2 minutes to say a bunch of thank yous. I think this would not have been possible. Thank you, Kamini, Pragya, Nemo. Yes, thank you. I think, I've come to realize very often we all go through events in life which changes in ways that we don't expect at that time. So I go back to 2008, where I was with McKinsey in the US, and I came back to India because my father was diagnosed with cancer. And at that stage, I felt my life was coming apart. But in a way, that's what started me on this journey, which has eventually led to this book. It's one of those days where I wish he was here to witness. So thank you, Appa, for everything. But I think many people to thank. I have Govind Iyer here, who's been a kind mentor and who sort of took me under his wing, and whatever I know is thanks to Govind's mentorship and just seeing him go about his work just watching him was like going to business school. My other colleague, Neeraj Sagar, I think he had his father's operation that he had to attend to. So he wrote me a message saying, I can't make it. And I said, by prioritizing family, you're actually, honoring flavor. So I'm grateful that you're staying back and not coming here. So Neeraj is the other person who's not in the room. But I think many colleagues from Egon Zehnder who are here, so very grateful for all the learning from them. And many of you, I think coaching very often is seen as one person helping the other person. But what I've come to realize is it's such a symbiotic process, and I see many of the people I've worked with here, so very grateful for just their companionship, their wisdom, and how they inspire me by being who they are and by caring about me in ways they don't realize. So truly touched by all of you that took this time to be here, to be with me. It really means a lot. And I know I haven't mentioned my mom. Amma, thank you for everything. I don't think I could have come here if not for the sacrifices in the early years. So I realize that we take a lot of these things for granted. So very grateful for everybody here who's taken the time to be here. Hopefully the book makes a difference. Thank you once again, means a lot. Enjoy, please stay for dinner. I'm here as long as required. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, special thank you for Prakash. Can we have a round of applause? And yes, and before we forget, if I may call Radhika to the stage. Radhika, thank you for publishing this book. Amma, can you come on stage? Just a thank you from us to Radhika first. Radhika, thank you for all the help in making this book come to life. Prakash, I think you can drop the mic now. Thank you for hosting us today, Prakash. Here's a thank you from us. And if I may call my sister Nandini, she's a mandala artist, so she's kind enough to make a piece of art for Prakash. Thank you so much. So thank you once again, Prakash, for doing this for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
There are prizes on offer for the person who can guess. Or you just told them what?
Yes, I did. So thank you. Dinner is served. Please be around. Look forward to interacting with all of you. Thank you so much for coming.